There is a power in handwritten notes. If I'm struggling to get a hold of somebody, like there was this building next to an 8-unit I was selling, and I could not get a hold of them. Every number didn't work, and I wrote a handwritten note, and she called me. And I get a great response from the very few handwritten notes I write. So there's a power there. They want that handwritten note. It works is because I wrote it myself. And there is a power there, especially with that boomer generation.
Yo, what is up, everybody? My name is Matt Drouin. I am the host of the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors Podcast. I am psyched out of my mind today to have a special guest on, Miss Erin Thomas of a KW Easy Sales team based out of Ohio. Erin is an investor-focused realtor, and she specializes in working with both commercial and residential multifamily investors, but isn't a stranger to any type of investment. Starting her real estate career as a wholesaler, she is more well-versed in the off-market world of investments than a typical agent. She actually sold 49 homes her first year in real estate. I sold 3 homes and made $16,000 in 1 year. Thank God for that part-time job at the liquor store, right? To keep me alive. So that being said, I don't want to take over Erin's story. So welcome for being on the show. I appreciate it, Erin.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Okay. First question is a doozy. You were born, now you're here. What happened in between?
Oh, a lot happened in between. So born and raised in Cleveland, we grew up in the old Brooklyn area, which is now a pretty booming area for investors. And when it came time for me to go to the middle school, which wasn't good, metal detectors and such, my mom actually became a clown to pay her way through college. And so I think my first lesson in entrepreneurship was actually from my mom, who was hustling, at night and on weekends as a clown for the zoo, and then would go to school at Tri-C until she got her degree, and she still works the clinic now. And then we were able to move to Brunswick, and that's where I graduated from high school. And so that was great. I went to OU for a year and came back to help take care of my grandma, and graduated from Tri-C in the fine arts. So originally my big plan, what I thought my life was going to be, was I was going to go into musical theater and I was going to be famous and be on a stage. And when it came time to do my auditions, I kept losing my voice, and it turned out I had a polyp on my vocal cords. And so unfortunately I couldn't do that. And so I was calling an audible, and we figured it out. And now I'm pretty happy with, where the path went. But I ended up meeting my husband, and he was from the east side. And they say, what east will come west, but west won't come east. And it's true, because I don't think I'd ever been to the east side before I met him. And so he was from Menor, and we got together. We lived in Ohio City for a little bit of time, and now we've been married. Oh man, we got married in 2015, and I have 2 little boys now. But that kind of jumped ahead. There was a little bit of time between there. A few other things that I did. Next thought was I was going to go into physical therapy. I love the human body, and I love, everything that it encompasses. And I thought that was going to be the plan. But then I was working at a high-end car detail shop, and he was like, hey, I'll pay you the same salary if you stay. So I said, okay. That didn't work out. And really my first lesson in entrepreneurship was when I became the executive assistant to the co-founder of Priceline. Jeff Hoffman is incredible. He teaches entrepreneurship all over the world, and what he does is just really incredible. And having started by listening to his speeches and having that one-on-one time with him really just planted this seed in me that I think has just continued to grow over the years. And so, he was probably that start. Maybe my mom was the start a little bit before that. And, then I took a job doing social media and marketing for a small boutique brokerage, and here I am. And I should update real fast. You took the bio from my YouTube, and I should probably go update it. I actually don't do any residential anymore. I have a team below me now that does all the residential. So now I'm commercial focused only, but all the rest is true.
Excellent. Okay. I'm glad the rest of it was true and I wasn't telling any lies there. So besides that one, so social media management, you had a lot of bobs and weaves like around like your career. And I can't imagine having something like physical that you had no control over, that basically dashed your dreams of being like a Broadway star. And up to like being a social media manager, like I'm trying to make the connection between social media manager to, okay, let me get my real estate license and do 100% commission only type of career.
Fair. Weird transition, right? So I was working at a high-end car detail shop, and then I go and I'm like, I'm going to take a job doing social media. I got the job, basically because I told her, I said, look, anyone can do Facebook. My husband and I had launched a Cleveland clothing company. And so I knew how to do the marketing for that. And I will say that was like 5 years ago. And marketing and social media is very different now than it was back then, that today you probably do need a degree. But so I started doing their social media marketing, and it was a small boutique brokerage, but really what they focused on was wholesaling. And so they have a really cool concept where the wholesalers come in, they find the deals, and the owner would be the one selling the deals. Pretty quickly, he was like, you should be doing sales. And so I started doing that, but the signing up of the deals wasn't as strong as I was with the buyers at that time. And so I became their first buyer's agent. And it was probably, I don't know, maybe a month or 2 months into that where he was like, let's get your license. And I put my nose down and got fully licensed in 6 weeks. I mean, from start to finish, reading all the books, I took all the online tests, and I was just, let's just blow through it. And that was the first year when I did 49 homes. Most of those 49 homes were off market. Only a few were on market just because of the business model they had. But the transition from social media to real estate was really because the owner of that company saw something in me.
Now, let's talk about the other weird transition that not many realtors make ever. And it makes me scratch my head. I mean, a little bit of a backstory here is my big aha moment was I was working in a residential real estate agency in Rochester, New York. And I had, formed a friendship with this little old lady who was like just a spitfire. And she was probably in her like mid 60s. Fast forward, I still have access to the MLS, and our MLS, like they have like a posting of like in memoriam of like the most recent realtor that died. And I saw this in memoriam of this lady, and I was like, oh my God, I just saw her 2 weeks ago, like climbing over a snowbank, putting in an open house sign up. And she never had any investment properties. A lot of realtors don't have any like retirement plan or anything like that. So like telling me about like the transition and the why, like did it happen by accident that you ended up acquiring investment properties on your own, or was it something that was by your own like design?
I think it was a little bit of both. So starting as a wholesaler, most realtors get into the residential side. I really never started as that like homeowner type agent. I started with investors. And those investors bought duplexes, and then they buy, larger. And so it came pretty naturally to see like this is how people are growing wealth. How do I become part of this? And but the first step is the scariest, right? Like how do you pull the trigger? You see it, you want to do it, but how do you do it? And so it took a little while. Gosh, I wonder how maybe a year or two into being in real estate was when I purchased our first, rental property. Um, but so it was probably a good combination of working with investors and seeing what they were doing, and then just doing a lot of research and learning, and then going to the networking events, and then just finally saying, no, we're going to pull the trigger, and pulling the trigger.
I'm a little bit curious because real estate investing business is probably a male dominated field, that sort of thing. Like, how did this conversation go with your husband? Was he completely on board with it, or was there some resistance there?
Oh, definitely no resistance. My husband and I have a very unique relationship. Like, you're meant to find your person, right? And we are definitely each other's person. We will pick on each other and make fun of each other more than you'll ever see us hold hands or kiss. But that's just who we are. But with that, we trust each other innately. And so, yes, investments is mostly male dominated, commercial is mostly male dominated. And so that is just a lifestyle that I'm consistently in. But I do feel like just in my life, I've always communicated and I guess gotten along better with males. I'm not that catty girl by any means. It's just, I don't know. I think girls don't approach me maybe sometimes, but it's that was kind of my comfort zone. So it was easy, and that trust has always been there. I bring him in all the time, because now he's in real estate as well. But yeah, I mean, there's moments where there's constant conversations, and there have been situations for sure where I'll keep getting messages, and he's like, "Okay, this doesn't make sense anymore." And most of the time, I agree. I'm like, I don't need to have these messages either. But most of the time, he knows that I draw a pretty strong line in the sand, and I'm not afraid to, preach about how happily married I am and my kids and my family. Like, it's nobody should be around me and think that I'm this single, ready to mingle kind of girl by any means. I am a homebody. My husband and I quit drinking this year, even just like we just like to be at home and at camp with our family. So I think it's comfortable for him, and I think he understands. And I think it was scary for him at first because our first house that we bought, I literally called him and said, "Hey, I'm buying this house. Do you want to come see it?" He's like, "You're not buying that house." I said, "No, I am though. Do you want to come see it?" And so he showed up and ended up liking it. But I think that for him is more annoying than the being around guys.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your first bigger deal. It was big for you at the time. Tell me about how that happened because you'd maybe grown your portfolio, and there may have been like a seminal moment where you wanted to scale up, or possibly this opportunity came to you apropos of nothing, like out of the blue. Like, tell me about this deal you want to make a case study for today.
Oh man. So I have this one big deal that I've talked about a lot on different podcasts. And so I'm going to go a different direction because what you said like was big for you at the time, right? And I think the first deal is always the one that's big. And what's funny is I actually still own this property. So it's fun to see the evolution of it and have that conversation. So I was making calls and, lead genning, and I found a seller who was willing to sell this house. It was in Euclid. And Euclid is a good area for rentals. People have pros and cons about it. Where this was in Euclid, it was in a really great area. It was almost like a suburb up a hill. It almost felt like it was in a totally different neighborhood. And that's why when I called him and said, "Hey," he's like, "You're not buying in Euclid." I'm like, "Yeah." But so I went to go see it and did the normal, I said your property 100 times because that's what we say when we're uncomfortable, right? What about your property? Tell me about your property and how much money does your property make? And she told me the story, and this woman had actually bought the house for her niece, and her niece ended up passing away 2 years after buying the house, and they had made some updates to it, and the house was in good shape. Like you could have placed a tenant in there, not blinked, not done anything, and it would have been fine. Um, but when we looked at it, I just felt like it had bigger potential, and so we negotiated a price, and I closed on it for 45,000, which was a really great price for this house. And then at the time, my husband is our contractor now. He's very handy. He grew up building houses, but at that time, he was a supervisor at the post office. And so he didn't really have the time to flip a house. So we did hire a contracting company to come and do the rehab. And we ended up spending about $45,000 in that rehab. So now we're all in, what is that, $90,000? And when we did our refinance, it refinanced at 150. So we lived there for 2 years, just over 2 years. And we're going to sell because, once you hit that 2 year mark, you don't have to pay, the capital gains tax now. So we were like, all right, maybe we should sell it. And I don't know what changed. I think we were kind of like, hey, let's rent it instead. And when I looked into that, the average rents in the area about 1,500. But we had done a really nice remodel. We had knocked out a wall to create a better flow and granite counters, and it was great. And I just felt like we could do something better with it. So now we have it rented at $2,100 a month. So an outlier by all means. It was rented for just over a year and a half, and the tenant just moved out. And I just walked it with another tenant, and we're actually about to accept their application on it now. But this property that was so scary going there in an area my husband wasn't sure of ended up being a house that we even lived in because it turned out really nice. And then now my mortgage is less than $1,000, and I'm making $2,100 a month on it.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the this was your first deal or no?
Yeah, this was my first one.
Okay. All right. So, I'd like to tease on this a little bit because I really want to use this show too. I mean, like to be evangelical about doing things that are uncomfortable for people. And the thing that's like very, very uncomfortable for real estate agents and brokers, for instance, is like starting their own journey as an investor, because they help so many other people create financial independence and financial freedom for their client or their clients' families, but really never are able to, partake in that and participate in that. So, this was a, total $90,000 cost base. Did you guys have this like $90,000 like laying around, or did you put it together like creatively? Like, tell me about that.
Sure. So the way we went about this purchase was we used a hard money lender that I use, Neil Wolf over at North Coast, and it's high interest, 15%, but it's very low out of pocket. And so I can't even pull out the actual number that I spent on this, but it was probably around 2% or so down, but 15% interest. And he does 100% of the financing. So we went into it with that hard money loan. It was all coupled into that. And then when we did our cash out refi, we went into a traditional conventional. Yeah. Now the big house that I said I talk about all the time now, we can go into that one if you want, because it has way more exciting stories here where I use multiple forms of creative financing and multiple forms on the refinance. And you escalate, you learn, right? And so at that time, I probably could have gotten her to seller finance, but I didn't even know to ask that. But at 45,000, I was like, I'll take it all day. So now, with this house that we're doing now, we used a hard money lender and a private lender separately. I used my commission as, additional income to come back for us in the property. And, you can only learn and grow through experience. It's not something on the first one. It was a great deal. It still is a great deal. But the hard money lending was the easiest way to go about it. And then just getting out of that, making sure we refinance in that first year.
Two topics that I want to do deep dive on to bring value to our audience, because one, you're a commercial broker, and two, your background is in lead generation, right? So let's talk about etiquette when somebody that's a residential investor is looking to break into the commercial real estate space and swim upstream into that river, right? What's the proper etiquette starting from day one, and how a residential investor can start talking to brokers, how to identify a broker to work with, and all that good stuff that we're talking about in the green room?
Sure. So I think when you want to get into commercial, just like if you want to get into residential, if you want to get into investing in general, you need to realize or figure out what your buy box is. What is it that you want to purchase? And you need to understand this to a T. And it's more so with commercial. You can say, hey, I want to buy apartment buildings. And while let's say a 10 unit isn't that far different from a 3 unit, a 100 unit is very different. And it's different. There's payroll built in, and the way the management works is different. You've got staff and healthcare, and there's a lot of differences. And so you need to know what makes you the most comfortable and what you want to proceed with. And then from that, you've got things like dry cleaners or gas stations or, convenience stores. Do you want to own a restaurant? Like, there's just so much you can do in the commercial space. You really have to hone it down. If someone were to come to me and say, hey, send me all the commercial properties you have, I would try to dig in that. If they were like, no, I buy everything, to me, that tells me you don't buy anything. And I probably won't even put you on my lead list. And I think a lot of people think that generalized, I'll buy everything will get them more deals. But in my experience with people who are experienced, it's probably going to get you less. So knowing what you want, where you want it, and what that deal should look like. Are you looking for equity? Are you looking for cash flow? Do you want appreciation? What's important to you? So I do a pretty good intake in the beginning, and I try to nail that down. If you want to buy a hotel, all right, well, where are you looking? What kind of value add do you need to have? And we break down those numbers. I've got a thing like a drive-through. Do you want to are you comfortable with a business and the real estate together? So there's conversation. You have to understand that first. When you're looking for an agent to work with, that agent should match what you're looking for. And in residential, almost everyone's a generalist, right? If I can sell a 3-bed, 2-bath here, I can sell a $500,000 house there. But in commercial, you'll find that most of the brokers are specialists. It's harder for a generalist to really create a good name for themselves because their fingers in are a bunch of little things. They've never really built up that experience. But for me, I think everyone knows me as multifamily. That's really where my strong suit is. Can I do other things? Yes. Do I like to do them? Yeah. But people come to me for multifamily. That's where my lead gen is. That's what I focus on. So if you want multifamily, I would be the right person for you. But if you wanted to invest in, let's say, land, can I do land? I'm working on a land deal now. Can I? Yes. But am I the best person for you for a land deal? Probably not. So I think being able to select the best agent for you is going to come with knowing what you want. Otherwise, any agent could work for you. But to that point, I would say one of the worst things you can do is try to work with a bunch of agents. I get buyer rep agreements signed by every client I work with. And part of it is a mental switch for me. I know that I now work for you, so I work harder for you. Whereas the clients who don't want to sign that agreement with me, I feel like we're not committed to each other almost. Some people feel that they don't want to have that commitment. And I can understand that. I definitely respect that. it's harder for me to want to put all my eggs into this basket because I work from transparency. So if a great deal comes along and it's off market or on market and somebody else's name is on that offering memorandum, I don't want to have to like scrape it off or put a text box on it in order to send it to you. Like, I just want to be able to send it to you because we work together, right? And so I think that's the next important piece is that when you find that agent, commit to that agent. Don't try to pin them against each other. Like, you can contact, if you really need to, contact an agent directly and then send them over to your realtor. But let us work for you. Like, I'm here to work for you. If you find a deal, let's work it together. But I think they don't use realtors well enough, or they try to pin them against, thinking they're all going to work for them. And you're actually losing. You're losing when you do that because nobody's working for you as hard as the one person who committed to you will.
Yeah, I have a little bit of like a feedback on this whole thing because I mean I've being a former broker myself, for instance, my greatest fear of signing an exclusive buyer rep agency agreement with a commercial broker, for instance, and by the way, I've never been asked to sign one as an investor, is that my fear was that okay, now they got me locked up for a year, and what if they just don't do anything? Right. Because there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot of brokers out there that just like, they wait for stuff to come up on LoopNet, or they wait to like, have lunch with somebody and they, another broker and like, hey, what do you got in the pipeline and that sort of thing. And don't really, go out there and like work it. Right. So, and I think that we're fine being committed to a broker, but we want to make sure that they are actually putting the work in and getting us deal flow in the process. So how can you, and this will segue into the next question, but how do you like protect yourself in that, or even like know that broker is going to really work it, working for you and working on market and also off market opportunities as well.
Right. I mean, definitely you should be asking the questions about how they find off market opportunities because a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, I get them, but they don't know what they're doing. So you really need to dive into that question. But I come up from a place of transparency again. So my contract, if after 60 days you don't feel like I'm working for you, the contract's void. Like, you can walk away. And that's right. But you do, or you should give it at least 60 days because it's really hard. Like, if you came and you said you wanted a ice cream store in this one small town, it might take me 60 days to find one lead that matches that. But if you're looking for multifamily, within probably 30 days, you're going to know if I'm working for you or not. So you should give it at least 60 days just to make sure that maybe it wasn't because they were on vacation or just there wasn't deal flow. But after 60 days, if I'm not working for you, we should rip up the contract. I don't want to be personally committed to someone who doesn't want to work with me. That's just a hostile environment, and that's not how I want to operate my business. So if you don't want to work with me, then I don't want to work with you either. But you should give it at least a little bit of time to make sure that the process itself is working. Or maybe it's sometimes that 60 days is just diving into the buy box and pulling out the flaws in it and really kind of figuring out, oh, wait, I don't want this. Oh, wait, I don't want that. And now we figure out what we actually need or are looking for.
Yeah, so I mean, there is this common misconception out there that in the commercial real estate space, that brokers don't cooperate, and everybody wants to get full commish, as they say, and that it's basically just dog eat dog in the commercial brokerage space. What do you have to say? What do you have to say to that? Do you see a lot of cooperation that happens out there in the commercial brokerage industry, and how does that happen?
So you're not wrong. I'm part of KW Commercial, which operates more like a realtor brokerage would, where there's more cooperation than some of your larger commercial brokerages. I'm not even gonna say names, but you know what the big brokers are. The difference, I think, is the model. Okay. So the way these other brokerages operate is typically there's 2 to 5 different brokers involved in each deal. Okay. The communication on that is really inefficient. So I'm not sure who came up with this business model, but if I want to find out about this property, I call 6 people. This guy tells me to call this guy. And then as you go down, this one's like, oh, this one has that document. And so you get a little bit of the runaround. But that tells you why they push for that no commission to the buyer's broker, or they try to retain both sides, is because they're splitting it so many different ways. So I can understand why they might go that route. For me, my job is to the client, and the job is to get the property sold as quickly as for as much money as possible. So me trying to get both sides of that is going to limit the ability for one of those two things to happen for sure. So I'm always a cooperating broker. My brokerage up until the new NAR changes was always 50-50. We were always 50. Whatever I signed the deal up for, I got 50, you got 50. And I signed deals up at 7%. So they were getting 3.5%, which is above the standard that they were normally getting. But I wanted those people to work with me. And when they got a little bit extra, they worked with me really well. I think I think it's not uncommon what you're saying. I think the old model of selling commercial real estate as it was did lack a lot of cooperation. It did leave, and it still does leave a lot of these companies where they're very adamant on only getting one side. There's a company out of Columbus and they sell a lot of hotels and they will not offer you a brokerage, like a buyer broker commission. So again, that goes back to having a conversation with my buyers like, hey, we have this in place, the buyer rep agreement in place. And then the understanding is that when you go to put a property under contract, if my buyer has to pay my commission, that has to get added to the money he's paying for the property, right? And so the innately, the offer we can give you is going to be less. And so that's how I present it. If someone doesn't want to work with me, okay, that's fine. That's fair. You don't want to offer a commission, that's fine. Just please understand that his offer is going to be minus what my commission is now, where I can have my buyer pay me 3%. If you would have offered 2, that probably would have saved your client a little bit of money. And for me, cooperation is key. I think we should all work together. I would rather sell a deal and move on to the next one than hold a deal for a year and a half trying to get both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah. Under that old model, there's, it's how I actually bought my first like 28 unit apartment mixed use deal. It was a pocket listing with this broker, didn't have it any place. And it was like incredibly an inefficient way to get visibility in this property. He had this pocket listing for like 2 to 3 years until I bought it. And everybody was like, how'd you find out about this deal? And I was like, I don't know. It was this guy's pocket listing that, some other investor told me about. It wasn't their cup of tea. So, no, so that's like, I really, really believe in cooperation as well. And I think it just like, it leads to less like holding the cards like close to your vest as well. Cause I think it's just better business to be transparent with whoever you're doing business with, whether it's whether it's broker, vendor, and other, your lender and investors and all that stuff. So, we have about 4 minutes here left, but I want to get into something tactical on the lead gen thing there because it seems to be kind of like in your zone of genius. So let's say I have a list of properties that I pulled off of CoStar, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm very specific in terms of what I want to do. What are the sort of like tactical type of things you do in your lead generation to make substantive contact with property owners, and then also like the methodology for like maintaining contact with them? Because like the reason why brokers are so important is because that's your full-time job, is to make deals happen. And some people don't realize how much work it is and how long the lead, like the life cycle is from like from first contact to contract. But if somebody was going to do it on their own in terms of going direct to seller, what's the sort of like tactical like order of operations that you use?
Sure. So, I mean, if you go on CoStar, you're going to pull a list. Hopefully, the contact owner's name is there and you have a phone number, but not always is that the case. Um, so then you've got to do a little bit of digging. You've got the LLC, and I've heard of Corporation Wiki is a way to dive into the LLCs. I personally haven't had success. It might be user error though. And Corporation Wiki, otherwise the Secretary of State, you kind of can dig into some of those documents there, and you can sometimes find the nuggets for who actually signed the documents. So that would be your first way to get their name. Then I can use a tool, either Fast People Search or True People Search, and they'll give you a lot of numbers there. And be careful with the emails, because if you email too many wrong emails, you're going to start getting spammed, and you don't want that to happen. But just start calling those phone numbers. And, I keep a spreadsheet of the phone numbers, and I call them until I get a good number, and then they move into the CRM for the long time life cycle. But until we have that number, it doesn't go over there. So you have this number, and it's about calling. And it's not about calling and saying, hey, would you be interested in selling or buying or whatever? The call is about adding value. And that's, if you're doing anything in real estate, add value. I do this because I want to add value. You do this because you want to add value. And if you're making that call, if you were to call and say, hey, I just saw that this happened with the feds and blah, 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 is that going to change anything with your plans? Or how are you handling that? Or, hey, I noticed that vacancy went up a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about your building? And how you're able to either manage that or how you're being affected by it? So you're just getting them conversating with you about something that you can add value. And there's tons of opportunities, things going on in the neighborhoods and, things around them. But that's your initial call is like, hey, did you hear about this? Hey, did you know? Hey, can I help you? And if you can find a way to add that value, they'll just start talking to you. And there might be a long follow up period, and commercial takes a long time. If you're trying to do the bridge from residential to commercial, you need to be prepared that it's not 60 days, it's 90, it's 6 months, it's a year. It depends on what you're trying to do. It takes time. And if you're really trying to nurture those leads, I'm working on a very large deal, a 100+ unit deal. And I'm working with another wholesaler on this. And he has been in contact with the seller for probably 2 years consistently. He is the only point of contact. He's who they're going to use. But 2 years consistently, he's going to be the guy. And now we're finally at the reviewing of the documents. We finally got the next step, and we're scheduling the meeting now. So we're there. But that was a 2-year process to get there. And this is one that we'll probably take down ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that my old methodology and expectation when I was a residential investor was, I was a direct mail junkie. I wasn't that great at like cold calling, but I'd send out like 1,000 pieces of direct mail. I'd put it on a business credit card, and I'd usually get like 3 deals out of it, right? Because it would be somebody that would be like, out of just like the numbers game, you're going to have like a handful of people that are going to be have some level of motivation, like a little old lady that can't keep up with her house anymore, right? And it's like she needs to sell like yesterday. And my expectations were like very, very violently destroyed when I spent like $25,000 on multiple direct mail campaigns to owners of commercial properties and didn't get a single deal out of it, because it's just like you're dealing with a more sophisticated owner that they can be 50% occupied and they're still breaking even and they don't need to sell. But there's that old adage of like no pain, no sale. At some point in time, that property owner is going to be in pain. Maybe they got more notices to vacate than they anticipated, on a particular summer or something like that, or just something happens, right?
In Cleveland, the taxes just went up. And so that's the conversation we were just having, actually, is the taxes went up and these owners where they were breaking even are probably not going to be breaking even anymore. And so they never raised the rents. They kept everything where it was. I'll tell you, I think direct mail is one thing, but there is a power in handwritten notes. So if I'm struggling to get a hold of somebody, like there was this building next to an 8-unit I was selling, and I could not get a hold of them. Every number didn't work, and I wrote a handwritten note, and she called me. And I get a great response from the very few handwritten notes I write. So there's a power there, because especially if you're contacting that mom and pop owner who's had it for a long time, they want that handwritten note, the handwritten envelope. Don't put it in your printer and try to cut time. Like, the reason it works is because I wrote it myself. And there is a power there, especially with that boomers generation.
Yeah, it'll be a good job for like my children in the future to
And then
handwrite
pay them
notes.
and then do all tax deductions with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the whole thing is like mastering the tedious, and I think that a lot of people are expecting to apply like these like artificial intelligence and all this technology when it comes to curating like deal flow or even curating relationships with potential investment partners, for instance. And it really is like it's like a lot of caveman stuff. It's just tedious, but it's effective. So, Erin, I want to thank you so much for being generous with your time. Parting words of advice for our listeners out there that are own a couple of rental properties. They want to scale into multifamily, commercial, like industrial, retail, office, that sort of thing. What's your words of advice on what they can do today, this week, this month to get the journey started?
So I was telling you a little bit about this before, is that I heard this saying, and somebody was saying that there's too many people who know what to do with the kill, but not enough people who know how to hunt. And if you want to go from residential to commercial, one of the easiest things you can do is go find deals. You do the lead gen, you find the off market deal. If you can find a good deal, the money will be there. People are concerned they don't have the money to go buy this. If you can find and sign up a really great deal off market, then you go into the investor groups. I'm part of a lot of different masterminds, and there's a lot of power in those, that if you need one tip, it would probably be to join good mastermind groups. But once you're in there, you've got those connections and you can have the money. And so finding the deal is the very, very first thing. There are too many people who like, okay, now I can flip at this and I can turn it into an Airbnb and I can do all of this, but they need the deal to do any of that. And not enough people are sourcing those deals anymore. If somebody wanted to find deals in Cleveland and brought it to me, I'll 50-50 it with you. Like, let's work together. You can learn from me. I can learn from you. We can all make money on the deal. Like, it makes a lot of sense. So find the way that you can add value to the people who have the money, if that's what you're lacking, or how can you bring value to whoever has what it is that you need, whether it be knowledge, money. You bring the value to them, find a way to do that, and I promise you'll be successful.
Erin, that's money advice. All right, we're going to wrap up, and I'll look forward to chatting to you in the green room. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and we'll see you around.
Thank you so much.